Hello, everyone. Funny story. I just spent 30 minutes recording chapter 9 only to find out that I wasn't actually recording. So, how great is that? Anyways, I'm here in the Food Museum today because a number of people had asked me to shoot in the Food Museum today. And I'm trying to figure out a way to make it so that you can all see the Food Museum. But I don't know how to do that, so I'm gonna turn the camera this way. And over here, I don't really know exactly what you're seeing, but we start off over here. The Hershey Kisses are not Oreos. This is the Oreo section, and we have different flavors of Oreos. I got Super Mario. I actually got 2 packs of those. I don't know why. But these Oreos here are from different countries. A couple of others here from different countries. Um, and then Swedish Fish Oreos, Sour Patch Oreos, different like cinnamon Oreos. All of these are different flavors. Here's some more from Korea, the cheese flavor and the berry flavor. And then I have some regular Oreos that are like specialty Star Wars, Space Jam. Um, I have these Legends, the Marvel Oreos. So there's that. Then we have the lemon and the Peeps Oreos, apple pie a la mode. All of these coconut, apple pie regular, cherry cola. Um, a lot of these have different flavors that you won't normally find. Um, we have the Coca Cola Oreos with popping candy. This is not the first popping candy that Oreos made. They also made the cherry cola with or popping candy also. So then we get into kind of the drink section, and there's the Oreo um, Coca-Cola. These Cokes, nothing special, but they were from the Florida Marlins inaugural season. I have my own Coke with Day on it. I have a funeral home water I just thought was funny. Coca-Cola Tic Tacs. These 3 Cokes here, Zesty Blood Orange, Blueberry, Acai, and Twisted Mango. They don't make those anymore. And then we kind of started the Peep section over here. This is on a bookshelf. All of these books are like murder mysteries. They're double deep there. Have Oreos, Dark Side and Light Side, some Fudge Stripes, some more books over here. And then over here, I have just some uh, things from different states and different places. I have 3 flavors of toothpaste: mint, vanilla, and chocolate. All of this is from Kentucky. Um, the raspberry habanero Hammonds, that sounds great, but I never really ate it. Bourbon smoked sea salt, didn't try it, but I got it when I went to Kentucky to see my friends. Um, got these donut flavored Jelly Bellies. These are from Rose um, Abaladejo, who's in my third period class. Then we have some different kinds of flavors. I have Hershey's with popping candy, have a lot of different Kit Kats, including apple pie, blueberry muffin, key lime pie Kit Kats, chocolate frosted donut Kit Kats. And then we have some more Peeps down there. Again, these are all on a bookshelf. One of my dreams and goals is to get an entire food museum area without the books. Some more Peeps down here. Here's some more Peeps, hot tamale Peeps. These candies here, these are marshmallow things, but they are, or Haribo things. They are from different countries, such as Switzerland, Denmark, anywhere in the Netherlands. All of the candy down here is from South America, except for the cookies and cream Peeps. Um, all of these are from different countries as well, these different chocolates. And then I have some different flavored Pop Tarts. I'm sorry for the mess on the floor. I'm organizing books as we speak. Some more Peeps. These are my favorite. This is Mexican jalapeno M&Ms. They sound great. I've never tried them. So, and then the little poop thing is from when I had open heart surgery and somebody gave it to me. Um, so this is the potato chip aisle. We have different types of potato chips. some more chips down here, along with some ramen noodles, some Doritos in the back, and Cheetos. And then I have 5 different flavors of Pringles, pecan pie, milk chocolate, white chocolate, and then there's some other beer can things back there. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, ketchup fries, and then some other potato chips from different states. All of this is on my Louis L'Amour. You can't see them all, but all of these have books behind them. Some more books that I've got to organize. Um, this is my philosophical bookshelf. So all of these are philosophers: Ptolemy, Copernicus, Augustine, Herodotus, um, Gilbert, Galileo, Pascal, Newton. And then down there at the very bottom is the entire collection of the Left Behind series. So that's kind of the food museum and a little bit of the library. Um, I can take you in this bedroom also, but again, I'm in the middle of, but I have some different books down there. All of these are murder mysteries: John Grisham, David Baldacci. All of those are collection of Lee Child books. James Patterson and Vince Flynn. All of these are Dean Koontz books. And then I have like the Divergent series and the Twilight series. And I have never read any of those, but I do have those. I also have a bunch of Stephen King. Went to garage sales, and these are the books that I got from the library sale last week. Those are some I got from the garage sales today. Anyways, we're not recording in any of those bedrooms. We're just looking and everything. So today we're going to start reading chapter 9. And chapter 9, as you know, in chapter 8, they started changing some of the rules and some of the commandments. Actually, they didn't start. They started before that. But at the end of chapter 9, they said rather than no animal shall drink alcohol, they changed it to no animal shall drink alcohol in excess. And I guess my issue with the changing of that rule is when you don't stand for anything, you're going to fall for something. And I feel like they aren't really standing for anything. I think the pigs are cowards, and I think they're wishy-washy, and I don't feel like they're really standing for anything. And I think that's going to end up hurting them in the end. I would say the same thing to you. You need to set your morals and your values, and you need to be okay living with those no matter what other people say. There are certain things that are right and certain things that are wrong. There are certain things that are negotiable, certainly, but for the most part, find your morals, find your values. If they're not your parents, that's fine. If they are your parents, that's fine. You can get a lot of really good values and morals from your parents, but sometimes once you get older, some of those values and morals may change. I am completely different in my values and my morals than what my parents were. And so you have to decide what really matters to you. Well, the pigs are continually changing that standard. And so as we get into chapter 9, they've just remembered that Napoleon in chapter 8, he was going to die. And then I think it's that he was drunk and passed out. So all the other pigs thought he was dead. And then he came back and he was fine. And the law had changed that they could drink alcohol, but not to excess. So as we start chapter 9, we're going to see a little bit more about what's happening with the other animals, including Boxer. So chapter 9. Boxer's split hoof was a long time in healing. They had started the rebuilding of the windmill the day after the victory celebrations were ended. Boxer refused to take even a day off work and made it a point of honor not to let it be seen that he was in pain. In the evenings, he would admit privately to Clover that the hoof troubled him a great deal. Clover treated the hoof with poultices of herbs which she prepared by chewing them, and both she and Benjamin urged Boxer to work less hard. Poultices is just a paste that is made for healing sores and wounds, and it's made out of herbs and spices. A horse's lungs do not last forever, she said to him, but Boxer would not listen. He had, he said, only one real ambition left: to see the windmill well underway before he reached the age of retirement. At the beginning, when the laws of Animal Farm were first formulated, the retiring age had been fixed for horses and pigs at 12, for cows at 14, for dogs at 9, for sheep at 7, and for hens and geese at 5. Liberal old age pensions had been agreed upon. As yet, no animal had actually retired on pension, but of late the subject had been discussed more and more. A pension is just, it's what you get paid once you retire, and a lot of that depends on how many years you've been working and how much you got paid in those years. So I retired from Florida after 33 years of teaching and started drawing a retirement pension. So I get a check every month from the state of Florida for all the work that I did for 33 years. I am now in Missouri, and I will eventually, when I retire from Aurora or from Missouri, I will eventually get another retirement check once I've been teaching 5 years. And then I also get, or I will also get, I don't yet, get a Social Security check. And Social Security is also another type of pension that I've been paying into since I was 16. So that's what a pension is. Now that the small field beyond the orchard had been set aside for barley, it was rumored that a corner of the large pasture was to be fenced off and turned into a grazing ground for superannuated animals. Superannuated just means old. I'm superannuated. For a horse, it was said the pension would be 5 pounds of corn a day, and in winter, 15 pounds of hay, with a carrot or possibly an apple on public holidays. Boxer's 12th birthday was due in the late summer of the following year. Meanwhile, life was hard. The winter was as cold as the last one had been, and the food was even shorter. Once again, all rations were reduced except those of the pigs and the dogs. A too rigid equality in rations, Squealer explained, would have been contrary to the principles of animalism. In any case, he had no difficulty in proving to the other animals that they were not in reality short of food, whatever the appearances might be. For the time being, certainly it had been found necessary to make a readjustment of rations. Squealer always spoke of it as a readjustment, never as a reduction. Ladies and gentlemen, people will always find a new way to phrase or reframe a method or an idea so that it doesn't seem as bad as what it was. And that's what readjustment to reduction is. But in comparison with the days of Jones's, the improvement was enormous. Reading out all the figures in a shrill, rapid voice, he proved to them in detail that they had more oats, more hay, more turnips than they had had in Jones's day, that they worked shorter hours, that their drinking water was of better quality, that they lived longer, that a large proportion of their young ones survived infancy, and that they had more straw in their stalls and suffered less from fleas. The animals believed every word of it. Truth to tell, Jones and all he stood for had almost faded out of their memories. They knew that life nowadays was harsh and bare, that they were often hungry and often cold, and that they were usually working when they were not asleep. But doubtless it had been worse in the old days. They were glad to believe so. Besides, in those days they had been slaves and now they were free, and that made all the difference, as Squealer did not fail to point out. There were many more mouths to feed now. In the autumn, the four sows had all littered about simultaneously, producing 31 young pigs between them. The young pigs were piebald, and as Napoleon was the only boar on the farm, it was possible to guess their parentage. Piebald just means they had black and white patches. It was announced that later, when bricks and timber had been purchased, a schoolroom would be built in the farmhouse garden. For the time being, the young pigs were given their instruction by Napoleon himself in the farmhouse kitchen. They took their exercise in the garden and were discouraged from playing with the other young animals. About this time, too, it was laid down as a rule that when a pig and any other animal met on the path, the other animal must stand aside, and also that all pigs of whatever degree were to have the privilege of wearing green ribbons on their tails on Sundays. The farm had had a fairly successful year, but was still short of money. There were the bricks, sand, and lime for the schoolroom to be purchased, and it would also be necessary to begin saving up again for the machinery for the windmill. Then there were lamp oil and candles for the house, sugar for Napoleon's own table. He forbade this to the other pigs on the ground that it made them fat. And all the usual replacements such as tools, nails, string, coal, wire, scrap iron, and dog biscuits. A stump of hay and a port of the potato crop were sold off, and the contract for eggs was increased to 600 a week, so that the year the hens barely hatched enough chicks to keep their numbers at the same level. Rations reduced in December were reduced again in February, and lanterns in the stalls were forbidden to save oil. But the pigs seemed comfortable enough, and in fact were putting on weight, if anything. One afternoon in the late February, a warm, rich, appetizing scent, such as the animals had never smelt before, wafted itself across the yard from the little brew house, which had been disused in Jones's time and which stood beyond the kitchen. Someone said it was the smell of cooking barley. The animals sniffed the air hungrily and wondered whether a warm mash was being prepared for their supper. But no warm mash appeared, and on the following Sunday, it was announced that from now onwards all barley would be preserved for the pigs. The field beyond the orchard had already been sown with barley, and the news soon leaked out that every pig was now receiving a ration of pint of beer daily, with a half-gallon for Napoleon himself, which was always served to him in the Crown Derby soup tureen. But if there were hardships to be borne, they were partly offset by the fact that life nowadays had a greater dignity than it had before. There were more songs, more speeches, more processions. Napoleon had commanded that once a week there should be held something called a spontaneous demonstration, the object of which was to celebrate the struggles and triumphs of Animal Farm. Ladies and gentlemen, if a spontaneous demonstration is scheduled, then it's not spontaneous. The very idea of spontaneous means it happens just organically out of nowhere. To schedule something doesn't make it spontaneous. At the appointed time, the animals would leave their work and march around the precincts of the farm in military formation, with the pigs leading, then the horses, and then the cows, then the sheep, and then the poultry. The dogs flanked the procession, and at the head of all marched Napoleon's black cockerel. Boxer and Clover always carried between them a green banner marked with the hoof and the horn and the caption, "Long live Comrade Napoleon." Afterwards, there were recitations of poems composed in Napoleon's honor, and a speech by Squealer giving particulars of the latest increases in the production of foodstuffs, and on occasion, a shot was fired from the gun. The sheep were the greatest devotees of the spontaneous demonstration, and if anyone complained, as a few animals sometimes did when no pigs or dogs were near, that they wasted time and meant a lot of standing about in the cold, the sheep were sure to silence him with the tremendous bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. BT Dubs, the people who had to do that in the Connect Four game last week, I think it was, I don't know. I know it was Clara, I believe, and I don't know who the other one was, Jaden. Y'all did great. So I might have you all start doing that every time we get to it. But by and large, the animals enjoyed these celebrations. They found it comforting to be reminded that, after all, they were truly their own masters and that the work they did was for their own benefit. So that, what with the songs, the processions, Squealer's list of figures, the thunder of the gun, the crowing of the cockerel, and the fluttering of the flag, they were able to forget that their bellies were empty, at least part of the time. In April, Animal Farm was proclaimed a republic, and it became necessary to elect a president. There was only one candidate, Napoleon, who was elected unanimously. On the same day, it was given out that fresh documents had been discovered which revealed further details about Snowball's complicity with Jones. It now appeared that Snowball had not, as the animals had previously imagined, merely attempted to lose the Battle of the Cowshed by means of a stratagem, but had been openly fighting on Jones's side. In fact, it was he who had actually been the leader of the human forces and had charged into battle with the words, "Long live humanity," on his lips. The wounds on Snowball's back, which a few of the animals still remembered to have seen, had been inflicted by Napoleon's teeth. Remember, earlier it was said Napoleon wasn't anywhere to be found. In the middle of the summer, Moses the raven suddenly reappeared on the farm after an absence of several years. He was quite unchanged, still did no work, and talked in the same strain as ever about Sugar Candy Mountain. He would perch on his stump, flap his black wings, and talk by the hour to anyone who would listen. "Up there, comrades," he would say solemnly, pointing to the sky with his large beak. "Up there, just on the other side of that dark cloud that you can see, there it lies, Sugar Candy Mountain. That happy country where we poor animals shall rest forever from our labors." He even claimed to have been there on one of his higher flights and to have seen the everlasting fields of clover and the linseed cake and the lump sugar growing on the hedges. Many of the animals believed him. Their lives now, they reasoned, were hungry and laborious. Was it not right and just that a better world should exist somewhere else? A thing that was difficult to determine was the attitude of the pigs towards Moses. They all declared contemptuously that his stories about Sugar Candy Mountain were lies, and yet they allowed him to remain on the farm, not working with an allowance of a gill of a beer a day. A gill is a quarter of a pint, 1/4 of a pint. I find that back in the days of Hitler and Stalin and all of the people that this book represents, that religion was kind of it's just a myth, a made-up fairy tale that they would allow people to believe in. But after a while, some of them stopped allowing churches to meet together. In China and other communist countries, it is illegal for churches to meet, but they actually have a very large underground church growing in China all the time. So, anyways, there's that. After his hoof had healed up, Boxer worked harder than ever. Indeed, all the animals worked like slaves that year. Apart from the regular work of the farm and the rebuilding of the windmill, there was the schoolhouse for the young pigs, which was started in March. Sometimes the long hours on insufficient food were hard to bear, but Boxer never faltered. In nothing that he said or did was there any sign that his strength was not what it had been. It was only his appearance that was a little altered. His hide was less shiny than it used to be, and his great haunches seemed to have shrunken. The others said, Boxer will pick up when the spring grass comes on. But the spring came, and Boxer grew no fatter. Sometimes on the slope leading to the top of the quarry, when he braced his muscles against the weight of some vast boulder, it seemed that nothing kept him on his feet except the will to continue. At such times, his lips were seen to form the words, "I will work harder." He had no voice left. Once again, Clover and Benjamin warned him to take care of his health, but Boxer paid no attention. His 12th birthday was approaching. He did not care what happened so long as a good store of stone was accumulated before he went on pension. Late one evening in the summer, a sudden rumor ran round the farm that something had happened to Boxer. He had gone out alone to drag a load of stone down the hill to the windmill. And sure enough, the rumor was true. A few minutes later, 2 pigeons came racing in with the news. "Boxer has fallen. He is lying on his side and he can't get up." About half the animals on the farm rushed out to the knoll where the windmill stood. There lay Boxer between the shafts of the cart, his neck stretched out, unable even to raise his head. His eyes were glazed, his sides matted with sweat. A thin stream of blood had trickled out of his mouth. Clover dropped to her knees at his side. "Boxer," she cried, "how are you?" "It is my lung," said Boxer in a weak voice. "It does not matter. I think you will be able to finish the windmill without me. There is a pretty good store of stone accumulated. I had only another month to go in any case. To tell you the truth, I had been looking forward to my retirement. And perhaps, as Benjamin is growing old too, they will let him retire at the same time and be a companion to me." "We must get help at once," said Clover. "Run, somebody run and tell Squealer what has happened." All the animals immediately raced back to the farmhouse to give Squealer the news. Only Clover remained, and Benjamin, who lay down at Boxer's side and, without speaking, kept the flies off him with his long tail. After about a quarter of an hour, Squealer appeared, full of sympathy and concern. He said that Comrade Napoleon had learned with the very deepest distress of this misfortune to one of the most loyal workers on the farm, and was already making arrangements to send Boxer to be treated in the hospital at Willingdon. The animals felt a little uneasy at this. Except for Molly and Snowball, no other animal had ever left the farm, and they did not like to think of their sick comrade in the hands of human beings. However, Squealer easily convinced them that the veterinary surgeon in Willingdon could treat Boxer's case more satisfactorily than could be done on the farm. And about half an hour later, when Boxer had somewhat recovered, he was with difficulty got on his feet and managed to limp back to his stall where Clover and Benjamin had prepared a good bed of straw for him. For the next 2 days, Boxer remained in his stall. The pigs had sent out a large bottle of pink medicine, which they had found in the medicine chest in the bathroom, and Clover administered it to Boxer twice a day after meals. In the evenings, she lay in his stall and talked to him, while Benjamin kept the flies off him. Boxer professed not to be sorry for what had happened. If he made a good recovery, he might expect to live another 3 years, and he looked forward to the peaceful days that he would spend in the corner of the big pasture. It would be the first time that he had had leisure to study and improve his mind. He intended, he said, to devote the rest of his life to learning the remaining 22 letters of the alphabet. However, Benjamin and Clover could only be with Boxer after working hours, and it was in the middle of the day when the van came to take him away. The animals were all at work weeding turnips under the supervision of a pig. When they were astonished to see Benjamin come galloping from the direction of the farm building, braying at the top of his voice. It was the first time that they had ever seen Benjamin excited. Indeed, it was the first time that anyone had seen him gallop. "Quick! Quick!" he shouted. "Come at once! They're taking Boxer away!" Without warning for orders from the pig, the animals broke off work and raced back to the farm buildings. Sure enough, there in the yard was a large closed van drawn by two horses, with lettering on its side and a sly-looking man in a low-crowned bowler hat sitting on the driver's seat. And Boxer's stall was empty. The animals crowded around the van. "Goodbye, Boxer!" they chorused. "Goodbye!" "Fools! Fools!" shouted Benjamin, prancing around them and stamping the earth with his small hoofs. "Fools! Do you not see what is written on the side of that van?" That gave the animals pause, and there was a hush. Muriel began to spell out the words, but Benjamin pushed her aside, and then in the midst of a deadly silence, he read, "Alfred Simmons, horse slaughterer and glue boiler, Willingdon, dealer in hides and bone meal, kennels supplied. Do you not understand what that means? They are taking Boxer to the Knackers." The Knackers is a buyer of animal carcasses. A cry of horror burst from all the animals. At this moment, the man on the box whipped up his horses, and that van moved out of the yard at a smart trot. All the animals followed, crying out at the tops of their voices. Clover forced her way to the front. The van began to gather speed. Clover tried to stir her stout limbs to a gallop and achieved a canter. "Boxer!" she cried. "Boxer! Boxer! Boxer!" And just at this moment, as though he had heard the uproar outside, Boxer's face, with the white stripe down his nose, appeared at the small window at the back of the van. "Boxer!" she cried Clover in a terrible voice. "Boxer, get out! Get out quickly! They're taking you to your death!" All the animals took up the cry of, "Get out, Boxer! Get out!" But the van was already gathering speed and drawing away from them. It was uncertain whether Boxer had understood what Clover had said, but a moment later his face disappeared from the window, and there was a sound of a tremendous drumming of hoofs inside the van. He was trying to kick his way out. The time had been when a few kicks from Boxer's hoofs would have smashed the van to matchwood. But alas, his strength had left him, and in a few moments the sound of drumming hoofs grew fainter and died away. In desperation, the animals began appealing to the two horses which drew the van to stop. "Comrades! Comrades!" they shouted. "Don't take your own brother to his death." But the stupid brutes, too ignorant to realize what was happening, merely set back their ears and quickened their pace. Boxer's face did not reappear at the window. Too late. Someone thought of racing ahead and shutting the 5-barred gate, but in another moment the van was through it and rapidly disappearing down the road. Boxer was never seen again. 3 days later, it was announced that he had died in the hospital at Willingdon. In spite of receiving every attention a horse could have, Squealer came to announce the news to the others. He had, he said, been present during Boxer's last hours. "It was the most affecting sight I have ever seen," said Squealer, lifting his trotter and wiping away a tear. "I was at his bedside at the very last, and at the end, almost too weak to speak, he whispered in my ear that his soul's sorrow was to have passed on before the windmill was finished. 'Forward, comrades,' he whispered. 'Forward in the name of the rebellion. Long live Animal Farm. Long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right.' Those were his very last words, comrades." Here, Squealer's demeanor suddenly changed. He fell silent for a moment, and his little eyes darted suspicious glances from side to side before he proceeded. It had come to his knowledge, he said, that a foolish and wicked rumor had been circulated at the time of Boxer's removal. Some of the animals had noticed that the van which took Boxer away was marked "Horse Slaughterer," and had actually jumped to the conclusion that Boxer was being sent to the knackers. It was almost unbelievable, said Squealer, that any animal could be so stupid. Surely, he cried indignantly, whisking his tail and skipping from side to side. Surely they knew their beloved comrade, beloved leader, Comrade Napoleon, better than that. But the explanation was really very simple. The van had previously been the property of the knacker and had been bought by the veterinary surgeon who had not yet painted the old name out. That was how the mistake had arisen. The animals were enormously relieved to hear this. And when Squealer went on to give further graphic details of Boxer's deathbed, the admirable care he had received, and the expensive medicines for which Napoleon had paid without thought as to the cost, their last doubts disappeared, and the sorrow that they felt for their comrade's death was tempered by the thought that at least he had died happy. Napoleon himself appeared at the meeting on the following Sunday morning and pronounced a short oration in Boxer's honor. It had not been possible, he said, to bring back their lamented comrade's remains for interment on the farm, but he had ordered a large wreath to be made from the laurels of the farmhouse garden and sent down to be placed on Boxer's grave. And in a few days' time, the pigs intended to hold a memorial banquet in Boxer's honor. Napoleon ended his speech with a reminder of Boxer's two favorite maxims. I will work harder, and Comrade Napoleon is always right. Maxims, he said, which every animal would do well to adopt as his own. On the day appointed for the banquet, a grocer's van drove up from Willingdon and delivered a large crate at the farmhouse. That night there was the sound of uproarious singing, which was followed by what sounded like a violent quarrel and ended at about 11 o'clock with a tremendous crash of glass. No one stirred in the farmhouse before noon on the following day, and the word went round that from somewhere or other the pigs had acquired the money to buy themselves another case of whiskey. So there you have it. Probably one of the saddest chapters of all literature ever written. Boxer has died. So I wonder, he will always be known for his maxims. I will work harder. Napoleon is always right. I wonder if you were to create a 5 or 6 word maxim, what would your maxim be for life? I want you to think about that and do that as an assignment. Create a 5 or 6 word maxim that you live by in your own life and that you think others should live by. Okay? Anyways, I will see you soon for the last and final chapter of Animal Farm. Until then, have a great day, and I love y'all. I think you're the best, and I will talk to you soon.